Yeah, I'm just gonna keep talking until I see my picture on my phone.
I was gonna say I have it up on my phone too. I'm looking.
I know. I always like keep it up on my phone just so I can.
Oh yeah, we're up.
Look, we're live. Perfect.
Oh my gosh, that's
So
so funny.
everyone on the internet, I want to welcome you to the first real talk we're going to be doing. This one is about queer representation on the stage, and what a better time to start this than Pride Month to talk about all this fun stuff. But before we begin, I just want to introduce everybody. Like, so we know who you're talking to, who's talking to each other, um, why we're talking about this, all that fun stuff. So I guess I'll start first. My name is Austin Shea. I'm the artistic director here at the Pharmacy Theater. Um, I've been involved with theater for a very long time, from directing, even acting back in middle school, in Seussical, everyone's first show, I feel like. And yeah, I mean, I've been a gay man for like 10 years now, I guess. Like out and open and proud, so can't really complain there. And yeah, that's me.
Who do you want to, Austin?
Um, I don't know because everyone's screen is different. So let's just go with Sarah. I'll just kind of move around in my clock shape.
Okay, cool. So my name is Sara Stephenson. I am the resident dramaturg for the Pharmacy Theater. I have been involved in theater since I was in high school. I've done everything from doing stage makeup for various shows. I've done costume stuff. I've been on the stage, though I don't prefer it. And more often than not, I do dramaturgical work. I have identified as part of the LGBT community since I was a sophomore in high school, so that's pretty exciting. And I do have lots of children, not lots of children, I have 3 of them, including, where you at? Right here. This little weeb back here, who also identifies as part of the LGBT community, which is special. So, high five.
That's awesome.
Okay, so Jack.
Hello, my name is Jack. I am a current rising junior at Rider University. I'm getting my BFA in musical theater. I've been involved in theater since I was very, very young. I'm actually in Minnesota right now, and that's where I grew up and kind of found my love for theater. I came out of the closet when I was a freshman in high school, and I was the only gay person in my high school. Very, very small town. And yeah, I'm just starting to break into the professional theater world. I've, had a few things going. I was supposed to be working at Weathervane Playhouse this summer, but due to COVID, it was canceled. But yeah, so I've just been trying to get involved with things via Zoom. So yeah.
Perfect. Jay.
Oh, hey, I'm Jay Armstrong Johnson. I've been doing theater since I was about 12 years old. I have been in 5 Broadway shows, from Hair to Catch Me If You Can, to Hands on a Hard Body, to On the Town, to most recently Phantom of the Opera. And I just did 2 off-Broadway shows called Scotland, PA, and Darling Grenadine at the Roundabout Theater Company. And our run of Darling Grenadine was cut short by 2 weeks because of COVID-19. I dropped out of school from NYU when I was a junior to go on tour with a chorus line, and I came out of the closet when I was 17 years old. So the summer after my senior year of high school, I kept it. I realized I was gay around age 15 or so when I started meeting other gay men that were like cool and fun and sweet and like not doomed for hell. But I kept it a secret from most people in my life until I had gotten into NYU and had an escape from Texas. So then I officially came out of the closet to everyone in my life and then said, bye, I'm moving to New York, and I never looked back.
Wonderful. And Chris.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Chris Farinelli. I have been involved in the entertainment industry since I was like young. I've been in a few movies. I've done a few like commercials. I have been part of the LGBTQ plus community I came out like 10th grade of high school. And the same thing, like I'm from like a really small town. There isn't really anybody around me that's like me. So it's like I was just myself and just went with it.
Wonderful. So now that everyone at home knows who we are as a collective, also I feel like we're in the Brady Bunch right now because I'm in the middle and all of you are surrounding me on the screen. I just wanted to point that out. But I guess the first question that I have is why is queer representation important on the stage? Why? Just why?
So I can say I think it's important because like someone like me, I've been in a small town where there's not really anybody like me around here. So to see somebody that's like me on like a bigger platform, it shows me that there are other people like me and I'm not like by myself in a small town with like nobody here. There is like a bigger group of people like all around that I can like relate to.
Yeah, I have to agree. I grew up in a small rural, like middle of nowhere, Perry County kind of country, like Pennsylvania country kind of place. And so it was very much, you still don't talk about it, about being out and being there. So I think being on the stage plays a very similar role in like the same way that literature does. If you don't see yourself being represented, you start to assume that something's wrong or that it's not right. And so to have it on the stage or available for people to see really helps to say, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not by myself. This isn't something that's wrong with me. It's just who I am as a person.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both those statements. Like I can just remember when I was watching the Tonys and I saw Ring of Keys from Fun Home, and just I remember like seeing that was so amazing because I was like, I felt that exact same way before. But yeah, I mean, like theater is a direct reflection of like society, and in terms of our history, like queer people are so important and have really done a lot of amazing things for this country. So it's important to reflect that, you know.
Yeah, to all of your points, I didn't really see queer representation on a larger level until like Will and Grace, which was like early 2000s, you know, so growing up in Texas in the 90s and early 2000s, all I knew about queer people were that they were bad. My very Southern Christian upbringing kind of taught me that like the gays, they're hellbound and they're against God, and the Bible says do not lay with a man. And so to my mind, I was not gay because I was a straight A student and I was a good person and I went to church every Sunday, perhaps on Wednesdays as well. And, you know, so I was fully convinced that I was not gay until like puberty hit and I met other gay people. But then Will and Grace came around and then Glee came around, and, you know, Broadway's always been gay. And I think that's like the white, straight world allowed for white gay people to show up, like Ellen and like Will and Grace. And so then all of a sudden, like white people started seeing representation from queerness back in the like late 90s, early 2000s. But I think our job these days, especially as white queer people, is to understand all these other letters that are in LGBTQIA+. I think bi people need much more representation. I think there's a whole lot more bi people out there than we realize. And when I was growing up, like bi was like, oh, you're just gay, you just aren't saying it, you know, and I think that kind of narrative is really not so great for the queer community. I think that the trans community right now, more than anyone, needs more representation, and especially our trans people of color at this time. So now that we have a platform as white queer people, it's time to be like, okay, people are listening, we're seeing representation of us. Now, who else do we know in our world, our lovely rainbow world, that needs the representation and helping push that forward?
Yeah, that was the big thing I remember when I first started exploring like what the different sexualities were. Because again, growing up in Perry County, it was always, okay, either you're queer and you are a male that likes males, or you're a female that likes females. There's no in between. So then as I kind of was learning more and started to identify as bisexual, people were like, oh, but you've only ever dated guys. Like, you have children. Like, you're clearly just straight and you just find other females to be like sort of attractive. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. So making sure, like you said, that making sure that there's more representation and more knowledge out there about the other parts of the community. It's not just you're a lesbian or you're gay, or there's so much other things that go into it in order to help boost that kind of understanding.
Yeah, and we're at the forefront of it because we're in the arts. And so we very much are a part of what is being represented on stage and on screen. And that's what we're putting out there to the general public at large, which is good. And I think that artists are always like the game changers and the movement makers. But really we should be focusing on like education and like what's going into our sex ed classes. Are we actually talking about gender identity? Are we actually talking about sexual orientation? Because God knows it sure wasn't a part of my high school sex ed program of understanding all of the letters of LGBT, all of the rainbow colors. So we still have a whole lot more work to do, I think, on many, many levels.
Yeah, I was like the same way. Like when I was growing up, like it wasn't represented here at all. It's like I grew up also, like I went to Catholic school. Like it was something that I just like the same way as like what you said. I'm like, I didn't even know that I was, because I was told always that it was like a choice, like you choose to be like that. So then it's like, for me, I was just like, well, that can't be me. So I didn't even start realizing it until after. And it was through like TV and the media that like I realized that I am like other people and not like what they tried to like make me be.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess also like when I was trying to figure out who I was, I feared being gay so much. Like I was like, I do not want to be a gay man. I do not want, and I'm always more feminine, but I was like, I do not like want to be a feminine gay man. So I like, to try to cope with that, like I tried to convince myself like I was trans, because I was like, okay, like I don't want to be a gay man, so I'll just be a woman. That way I can, you know, like be feminine and all this stuff. And like later realizing like there's nothing wrong with being feminine, and that was like never ever represented. And like you were talking about sex education in high school, I mean, I only graduated like 3 years ago, and I was out all throughout high school and never ever talked about, you know, gay sex or anything like that having to do with that. And I just remember like complaining to my health teacher. I'm like why? Like why? And yeah, it's definitely crazy how we think we've come so far, and we have, but there's of course just still so much that, you know.
And it's so weird because like they push, at least in, again, my school, they pushed, you know, safe heterosexual sex and safe, you know, all of this. But then, you know, I don't know, there could have been other kids in my graduating class that were just as quiet about their sexuality as I was, because yeah, you're sitting in these classes and you're like, okay, but that's not, what about what I'm trying to do? What about what I'm trying to figure out? And if they're waiting until high school, like that's important. Yes. As far as like safe sex is concerned, but even to just bring it up at like a younger, like in like middle school, because you have a younger generation that's more open to it, and they're more open to coming out and exploring. And, you know, I just asked my 12-year-old and she's like, we don't talk about that at the school that I was at. So for her at 12, she has to learn from TV shows, from theater, from being out in the world, from talking to other. We're not, the education system is just missing. They're missing a mark somewhere.
And that's what we as artists, that's our job, is to kind of remind society, like, here's the mirror, look at yourself. What should we really be teaching? You know, which is why Fun Home and Kinky Booth and the Normal Hart and all of these, like, I mean, theater has always been queer. Let's be real. So like we've been at the forefront of queer representation for a really long time. And it really just hit like the kind of mass media market on television and film in like the late 90s, early 2000s. But you're right. That's why representation is so important in what we do. The newest kind of scariest conversation that's at least happening on like a Broadway level is this idea of queer representation by queer people. Because even in media and on stage as well, we are having a lot of heterosexual people still playing these queer roles. And it's kind of a tricky subject because The Inheritance is one of the most genius plays out there for queer people and like kind of broke some barriers this year. And yet 50 to 75% of the people on that stage did not identify as queer. Most of them were actually straight white men. And so there was a bit of a bad taste in at least the queer community, theatrical community's mouth about like true representation and what that actually means. And, you know, when you're dealing with being an actor, you can sure act a certain way. But what does it mean to be truly represented by the actual community? It's a harder question out there, since this idea of acting is that you're stepping into the skin of a different human. So I'm just throwing it out there as like, hey, this is a topic that could be interesting.
Yeah, I was writing notes before this, just like thinking of things, and I wrote about that a lot actually, where I was like, when is it okay and when is it kind of not okay? Because, you know, like, maybe is the character that this person is playing, like, is it a gay character, and is one of their defining qualities and traits like that they're gay, and does this story revolve around them, you know, being a queer person? Like, should a straight person be allowed to play that, or is the character maybe happen to be gay, but the story doesn't revolve around it? It doesn't really add a lot to the story. Is it okay for a straight person to play a gay character then? Like, yeah, it's a very, very tricky subject. But I definitely think it depends, because do you pick someone who is truly like right for the role and does the role better in the room, no matter what their sexual orientation is? Or, you know, do you go with representing the community that the character belongs to? I don't know if you guys wanted to say anything about that.
This is kind of what I brought up. I mean, it's a tricky situation.
Yeah, we're in the process. This weekend, we're actually doing a Zoom reading of The Normal Heart. So Austin and I spent this last week looking at our audition videos and picking our cast, and that was a huge thing that I thought about when I was looking through audition tapes, because at least for the most part, from what I was seeing on the audition forms that I have, there's no spot where it says like, how do you identify your sexual orientation, for me to say, okay, you know, this person would make a really good Ned Weeks, because, you know, this whole show is about a group of gay men, you know, rising up against New York's politics during the AIDS crisis. So to be able to pick a group of actors that was going to put forward the message as passionately as I want it to be, was really, really difficult. I mean, I think we came up with a really great cast, but that was a constant thought, was, okay, you know, are they going, like, is the representation going to be solid?
And going along with what Sara was just saying, like, after we like casted the show and we sent out all the emails, and then I started to like follow these actors on social media, and I would have to say 90% of the people we casted do fall into the queer community, and you wouldn't be able to necessarily tell that from their audition tapes, because I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not an actor, but I feel like actors sometimes straighten up when they're auditioning, because as Jay had said earlier, a lot of the times those queer roles are played by straight men, so they kind of straighten up themselves in an audition to get those roles, because they don't think being queer is going to get them the role that they want.
Well, I've straightened up my whole life. I mean, I grew up in the South. Like, you know, for 17 years, I played the straightest role I could possibly play to keep from getting bullied and beat up and ridiculed. And so I know that that's a part of myself. I have this hyper masculine side of myself that I can put on for the world. And 99% of the roles I've played in my career have been straight men. I mean, because that's really what's been represented out there. I think I've played maybe 2 queer roles my entire career, and that's been like semi-recently. So it is kind of it's like, well, should the straight people be playing straight, and the gay people, should they be playing gays? You know, it's a larger question. But you're right. You're not going to walk into an audition and be like, "Hi, I'm Jay. I am a gay man, and this is my audition." You're kind of going to want to pick whoever is best for the role. And that's what Matthew Lopez had said when he initially cast The Inheritance off the West End before it even went to the West End. He's like, the people that walked in and auditioned, the ones that did the work the best got the roles. And then they transferred to the West End, and then they transferred to Broadway. So I understood that point. But the gays were up in arms about it, honey. I mean, it was a New York gay story, and all the New York gay actors wanted to tell this New York gay story, and it was being told by a bunch of straight British men. It's a thing.
I have this philosophy that if you are looking for a specific type of actor, you can always find it. Like if you're looking for a gay man to play a gay role, and if you're like, I can't find any gay actors to play this gay role, you're not looking hard enough. They're always out there. If you're looking for a very niche actor, and like, I can't find that, so I'm just going to use this straight white man to play whatever, you're not looking hard enough.
Right.
And I mean, like, sometimes it's really hard in small communities, like small community theaters, to find specific actors, but you can always find them if you're looking hard enough.
It's true.
Yeah.
And I think Sara can agree that at the Pharmacy Theater, we continuously look for actors. Sometimes we'll start rehearsals without having a fully casted show because we haven't found the person who's going to best represent that role, because what's the point of telling a story if you're not going to use the people that the story's about?
That's smart. I mean, if you look at Pose has been huge for the trans community. Every single person that identifies as trans is a trans actress on that show, and that's kind of incredible. Even in when they were casting The Prom, the movie of Prom, I believe Ryan Murphy wanted to use my 2 friends that originated the roles of the queer girls, the love relationship. And when Ryan found out that those 2 girls don't necessarily identify as queer, he did not cast them. They've later come around to realize that they fall somewhere in the middle of the spectrum of queerness. But I mean, I think it was really kind of smart of Ryan to be like, no, we actually need some people that identify this way because we're bringing this story to a larger audience, and it's important for representation. Mm-hmm. So I do think that there are people that are pushing forward that narrative. I just don't know why theater is not doing as well. There've been so many straight people that have been in La Cage aux Folles. There've been so many straight dudes that have played like Lola and Kinky Boots. It's confusing to me at those choices, and it's frustrating too.
Yeah, I think it is important. Like, we need to start casting people that actually fall into like certain categories, like what they are. But at the same time, I can see it from the other way too, where it's like, if you have somebody audition for a role that doesn't fall into the community, but they were better than everyone else at audition, are you not supposed to cast like it's like, I can see both sides of it, because it's like, I want to see it represented by people that actually are part of it, but you have to look at it from the people, like the directors and the casting people, their perspective. Like, they're not going to pick the person that's not as good just to have like representation.
Right. Well, and I think it also depends on like the severity of the project you're working on, like, you know, from smaller community theaters to like a Broadway stage or the screen, like how authentic do you want it to be? Like if you're telling the story of queer people and you don't cast queer people in the show, it's not like you can act the feelings, they're not going to be authentic feelings though. And yeah, like you guys were saying, I think it's so important. Like if you're going to tell these stories, you have to be able to find the people that have felt what the story is about and to represent what the story is about correctly. I also wrote stuff down about Pose too. And MJ Rodriguez, who was in Little Shop of Horrors as well, playing like a trans woman, playing
Audrey,
yeah. Just like imagine what that must have been like for her, you know, playing a trans woman, playing a straight woman, you know, like it's how much more interesting would that show have been, you know? And my friend told me in an interview with her that she was like, I don't think that straight people should be able to play trans people, but it does happen. So if that does happen, every trans woman should be able to be seen and get auditions for straight women, you know?
I think it is important. Like, they definitely do need to do something about it. Like, it's not represented in the way that it should be. Like, I agree, like, transgender roles, I think, should be played by transgender people. Like, you casting people for, like, a type of role, like, if they're actually part of it, it's going to be a more realistic, because that character, that person probably has felt the same feelings that they're going to be acting.
Right. More genuine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. And it starts from the higher ups, right? I mean, who has controlled all of entertainment since the dawn of time? The straight white man. And so that's where those decisions are coming from. And I think right now what we're seeing in the Broadway community, at least, is that our artists of color are like tearing down walls, and they know that they have been used as puppets, and that they've been a representation of what it means to be diverse. And there's been diversity casting, and that there's zero people of color behind the table. There's zero people of color on the producing end of things. And much in the same way, I mean, like that kind of representation at the higher levels has got to change. Like the straight white people of the world have got to, and the gay white people of the world, because there are plenty of gay white people up there that are making decisions too. We've got to kind of like step back, open doors, and allow opportunities for like a full spectrum of humans of all colors and all genders, all sexual orientations, so that like that the conversations that are happening before the stage and the screen, those conversations are more diverse, so that we can actually allow for proper representation by everyone.
And I think that like behind the scenes, like that higher up is just as important. Like you were saying, it's just as important as what's happening on the stage, because you could have someone who's really interested in theater, but not necessarily in being an actor, but they're looking at the directors, the producers, things like that, and they're seeing, oh, you know, there's no one like me, I can't do that. Mm-hmm. So to have those doors opened up where we could have, you know, younger generations of different members of the queer community, of different races, of different whatever, to say, oh, you know, so-and-so was able to do that, I'm going to be able to do it too. To open those doors so that they know that the theater is all around inclusive. It's not just what's happening on the stage that's inclusive for them. It's every part of the theater is open to them, and it's open for them to make decisions and possibilities and things like that.
Right.
We've talked a lot about representation as a whole. So my next question is about the authentic representation. We had mentioned like the normal Hart and those kinds of stories, but we also see a lot of queer representation that is romanticized for the stage. It's I don't want to say it's straight washed, but like you have a gay character, but like the story that's being told by the gay character is not fully like an authentic experience. Like he's like, oh, I'm gay, but I've never had any hardships, because that's too hard to digest for some communities that are watching this show. But like plays like The Normal Heart, like Larry Kramer did not care about what that community that's watching that show is gonna think. They didn't
Usually
care at all.
didn't.
Boys in the Band didn't care at all. So you have these like groundbreaking queer shows that pretty much just threw everything out the window. They're like, I don't care how well this is received by the community, because this is something that needs to be told. So those kind of stories is what I want to talk about. The importance of those kind of stories, telling where we've come from, where we're going, and being honest about everything, because it's not all like flowers and daisies. It's hard. For my master's thesis, I focused on playwriting and infectious diseases. So I studied the entire AIDS epidemic and ended up writing an entire play about a young boy in denial of his sexuality, but catching HIV after a hookup when he was experimenting, trying to figure it out. And that one decision of not having any education beforehand, not understanding anything beforehand, what that can do and what that can cause. Because when the AIDS epidemic hit, like Broadway took a massive hit. A lot of things that people didn't realize focused around the gay community on Broadway, they realized once this happened. And I can confidently say that the US government didn't do enough to help reprimand and help kind of control all of this. So the stories that focus around those times, if you're going to see a gay story on Broadway, HIV is going to be involved, is what I've seen. Because apparently, I guess apparently it's a big part of queer history, because it's affected so much. But I don't really see a lot of queer stories that don't involve a disease of some kind, a mystery disease. Even Falsettos has the disease in it. So I guess, and this might be more focused towards Sara and like the dramaturgical world, how important are factual details when you're telling these stories?
So important. Yeah, as for anyone watching this that doesn't know what a dramaturg does, they are the research fountain. So as a dramaturg, I read through the scripts multiple times and I will look at background information. So I've done shows like I've done Cabaret, I've done The Normal Heart, like all of that, and looking at that historical stuff so that I can then talk to the directors and the actors about portraying that kind of stuff on the stage. And I think having the historical accuracy, having those details correct is vital, especially when you're doing something like Austin's show Gridlocked. That's based entirely in something that happened in history. So to put that out, whether it's, we did a Zoom reading, whether it's we're putting it on the stage, whatever, for people who are watching it, maybe not everyone is going to think about it, but there could be that handful of people that says, well, that's not historically accurate, or they're going to try to use that as a basis for something, and it's not historically accurate. So they're not putting forward the facts, the history, so they're not helping anyone understand or learn. They're just kind of feeding more like fake news, essentially. And as a dramaturg for up and coming playwrights, I work with the playwrights themselves. So I've done stuff with Austin in kind of looking at the history. We just did the Scarlet Letter Bible Belt 1965, and I've been working with that in kind of checking off, because have a female romance that happens in there, scandal almost. So working with them and saying, okay, well, this is what it was like then, this is what it was like now, like this is how it changes, and having someone there to bounce ideas off of, I think is extremely, extremely important, because having shows like the normal Hart, and having shows like Kinky Boots and things like that can help open the doorways for playwrights who want to write shows with the same content or similar content. It's a really, really long answer.
It was a good answer though. So like long and good is okay.
I think back in the day that, I mean, you know, in the 80s and the 90s and even early 2000s, I think it was super important to tell these stories that were centralized around HIV and the AIDS crisis because the government wasn't doing enough. And so to be using theater as a platform to say, why aren't you doing enough? And to tell those hard stories and to be as historically accurate as possible. And to really kind of, we educate the public when the government decides not to, essentially, right? And so now I think where we are in 2020 is now wanting to educate the public, be like, I'm not an AIDS crisis, I'm not an HIV story, I'm a queer human. I want to tell queer stories. And quite frankly, my queer story looks pretty similar to a straight story. I'm living my life. I have the same rights. I can marry who I want. And so now I think what we're trying to do as a community is not spotlight the queerness, but spotlight the human, so that we're all, you know, trying to like integrate as one people. And so when we see a queer representation on stage or on screen, we're not like pointing at them and screaming gay, 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 queer, queer, queer. We're just watching a queer story unfold before our eyes without being so specific about it, so that we're normalizing it, right?
Yeah, well, just thinking of that, I was thinking about this earlier. I don't know if any of you guys have watched Dead to Me on Netflix. If you haven't, you need to watch it because it's so good. But there's a character who, her name is Judy Hale. She's a straight woman. She's seen with men throughout the TV show, but there's like one or two, I don't know how many episodes, but she starts to become interested in a woman, and she like sleeps with the woman and all this stuff, but there's nothing ever said about her like coming out as bi or anything. It wasn't even said. And it was just like so refreshing to like not even have to like worry about that. It was so cool to see her go through that experience. But just going back to queer stories about the AIDS epidemic and all of that happening, like I, of course, I'm only 20. And so I didn't have to deal with any of that, go through any of that. Obviously, I was born in 1999. And so I've seen more queer stories, just new stories coming up, you know, that don't necessarily always involve AIDS, but it is always about like gay, I'm gay, like those type of stories, which, you know, it would be refreshing to not have that just be the spotlight. But I do think it is important for people my age to see the stories about, you know, where the gay community came from and you know, like know what my history is about. And especially with this past month, I've learned so much that I did not know about the gay community, and especially just watching like Drag Race and like where all that stuff came. Like I've watched Paris is Burning like 5 times because I'm obsessed with it. But that gay history is like, it's so important that the young generation still learns about. So yeah, I definitely think there's a balance, but you know.
What we talked about earlier, it's something that I think about a lot. So it's like when we watch TV shows and we watch like all this stuff and they have like a gay character in it, they normally have that gay character act in a very stereotypical way. And it's something that I think they need to branch out of, because it's like, just because you're gay, like that doesn't mean you act one certain way that they try to make everybody look like they act. Like even for me, like how I said, I didn't even know I was gay until like later on, is because when I watched these movies and TV shows that had like a gay character in it, they all acted a very different way, like than how I am. So it's like it didn't make sense to me, because I'm like, well, I don't act like that. And I had to realize that on my own. And I think another issue people have is when they do cast like a gay character in it, they cast it to like, I don't know how to say it. It's like they they do it in a way to like, so they know they don't get like in trouble kind of. I don't know if a lot of people want to cast a gay person in it by choice. I think they do it because now they feel like they have to, which I think is something that is an issue. I think, like, do you know, like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, I
feel like casting directors feel like they have to hit each type of people. So they're like, okay, we'll have a Black person, we'll have a gay person, we'll have a like.
It's your token.
Right. Token gay character, correct? Yeah. And those token gay characters are usually like, okay, a more feminine gay guy who's the comedic relief of the story, who's like the funny person, you know? It's just like the classic, like, why can't there be a very masculine gay character and a very feminine gay character be the central love story? Like, where's that story happening? Because, you know, that's a huge reality for many gay people, you know? So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think you can look back at Will and Grace too, because like there's gay characters, but they are the comic relief most. Like when they come on, it's funny. They say something funny. They do something funny. A lot of the time, it breaks tension. Like there's tension between these two like usually straight characters, and then the gay person comes in, does something funny, breaks the tension. Everyone laughs, and then we move on. So I understand that a lot. It's there's a lot of representation that is changing. Like we've talked about it, things are changing. We're learning. There's a lot of coming of age stories about queer children. You have like Love, Simon. Like it's a coming of age story that focuses around a gay boy, and not knowing but knowing at the same time, because we've all talked about this before. Like we knew what we didn't know because we didn't know what was going on, and then you have those stories coming out which have the focus like I'm gay, but it's not the whole point of the story. So we're slowly moving away from the gay is the only character trait that you can portray.
And I
but
think
we still have time to go. We still have a long way to go before.
And I think we're making very minimal progress in like children's movies. So obviously I have children, so I watch kids movies all the freaking time. But so I don't know if any of you guys have watched the movie Onward from Disney. It's Disney's like Dungeons and Dragons essentially, but there is one character in one small scene. She's the officer. Her name's Officer Spectre. She comes on the stage, or not on the stage, on the screen, and she's talking to this other officer. And she's got one line where she says, you know, I understand. My girlfriend's daughter has had me up XYZ amount of nights. But that's the only thing that's said. So in the movie, it's not a big deal. It's said, we understand that she has a girlfriend with a child. That's it. But the media surrounding the movie blew up, and they're like, oh my God, Disney Pixar, like they have a gay character. Oh my God, it's a gay character. Like this is so great. We're making these huge strides. It didn't need to be that big of a deal. And if someone watching the movie, like people watching the movie, they can obviously then start those conversations and say, like, you know, my kids could have looked at me and been like, oh, what does she mean she has a girlfriend with a child? Well, okay, that opens a whole big door of opportunity for conversation. Like there didn't need to be as much hype. Like I feel like I was on Facebook every day and there was some new article being like, oh my gosh, Disney's Onward has a gay character. Like, okay, I got it. That's great. But you don't have to, you know, overblow it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think that we are all part of a queer community because we're all theater artists and we've been really inundated with just what it is to be queer and to be theatrical, and that's just kind of been our like base. I think what we're doing as a country is forgetting about those people in the rural areas, and like that queer representation in that film is probably really, really important for that really conservative family that watched that movie together. And so I think we need to, yes, we got to push forward and like do the more normal Hearts and do the more normalization of the queer stories, but also give love to that one tiny scene of that queer character, because the spectrum that we need in terms of entertainment to be able to push the narrative forward, those scared white people in the middle of Montana, you know, that one Pixar film is going to be like integral to their education into what it is to be queer and to open up those conversations with their kids. So as much as queer is a spectrum, I think like entertainment allowing queer in is just as much of a spectrum.
That's one of the first movies where like it is very evident and it's very blatant. Like this is a character who's a part of the queer community. Whereas, you know, there are speculations about other movies like The Road to El Dorado and things like that. But there's never anything that's blatant, like Officer Spector's like, I have a girlfriend. Like, so it's just one of those steps forward. And it's, like I said, it has the ability to open so many doors of conversation for people.
Totally.
Yeah. I was gonna say something. I forgot what I was gonna say. That's what it's the I don't know. Let's talk about those small country towns real quick. Because I'm hearing the similarities of like I grew up in a small town. I grew up in a small town of 800 people. Yeah, see, everyone of 800 people. And
we're like, oh, our small towns don't seem so small anymore.
Yeah, in Western Pennsylvania, in the Appalachian Mountains, like middle of nowhere. The closest Walmart was 45 minutes away, like in the middle of nowhere. And like I knew I was gay in 7th grade, but I didn't say anything because I was the only one. But then like I went to like a boarding school and like it was more accepted and like I was like, oh well, this is who I am, this is what's happening. But like now, being friends with those people on social media, there's a lot more than I thought. Because like they're like, oh, I moved to the big city and now I have a boyfriend, or I moved to the big city and now I have a girlfriend. So those small towns, as Jay had said, that small character is going to make a difference. Because I think in my graduating class, that would have been 57 people. 3 of us were gay. But like none of us said anything. But like we all had the same classes because there's 57 of you in a graduating class. Like you're going to have the same people in every class. And you're going to know everybody. You're going to know their family, their grandparents. You're going to know Sally down the street talking about Johnny down the street. Like, you're going to have this close-knit community. But now, being outside of the community and looking back in, you can just, you just know. Because, like, I didn't even have sex ed. Like, I never had sex ed throughout my entire K through 12 education. Not a single mention. Actually, I lied. There was a mention in 11th grade health when we watched the birthing video. That was about it. So like,
and I'm sure it was very heteronormative.
Oh, it was very heteronormative. It was like a natural birth in a swimming pool in a living room, like in a football. Yeah, right. Like scarred me for life. Like scarred me.
And that was what Austin went. You know, I never want to look at that again.
Never again. Not happening. But yeah, like, I think as theater artists and as dramaturgs and playwrights, like putting in the education into the piece. Like the normal Hart put education into the piece. Like it wasn't like blatant education, but like it made the people watching it think. And theater should always make you think. Because if you're watching theater that you're comfortable with, you're not watching the right kind of theater. Like, let me think. I even like even the Broadway shows that I've seen that are very heteronormative. Like I saw Diana before the whole coronavirus outbreak, and I left feeling uncomfortable, but thinking about things that happened in the show. So like I watched that, and then like even like you even see things in like Hadestown. Like it's a very heteronormative story, but like there are certain themes that make you feel uncomfortable, and you start thinking about it. And I think Broadway is doing a lot to, not a lot, but they're bringing those conversations forward a little bit. Like after Mean Girls went on Broadway, there was a big push about bullying again. It's just bringing up those conversations because now you have theater artists doing things for that thing, and teenagers love theater. Like even the big football stars are like, I don't like theater. They'll sit down and watch a theater show. Like when SpongeBob was on Broadway, it brought a lot of undersea diversity onto the stage and kind of talking about self-worth and self-confidence, and then Nickelodeon pushed it out live on TV for everyone to watch. like doing those kind of things, I think, are important. So what are your thoughts about bringing the conversations that people who go see theater to a broader audience? Like Hamilton comes out on Disney Plus in like 2 weeks. So like a mass audience is going to be able to watch Hamilton for the first time. And it might not have queer representation, but it has a lot of representation. It has a very diverse cast, which is very important for like those small country towns to see. So what are your thoughts on like bringing those filmed Broadway shows to the comfort of your own home?
I think it's really important to do that because like we were talking about, like they need to not like be afraid to talk about certain topics, and theater does talk about serious topics that aren't typically talked about. So it's like it needs to be available for everybody to watch so they can see like everything that's going on.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. Like with me being also from a small town and going to high school in a very small town, I don't know what it is about small towns, but like you said, it's like close-knit communities. It's comfortable. People stay there because they feel comfortable and they feel safe, and which is fine. But I think it is that lack of education getting to people with the whole Black Lives Matter movement and all this stuff that's been happening. Like even my mom, my parents have always accepted me. I didn't have any issues coming out, but she, you know, I've been trying to teach her so much. She's like, I just didn't know all these things. And she's like, I understand why you can't say all lives matter and like all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's like amazing that you're learning this stuff. And that's so great. It's just like crazy that so many of the people around me just have never been exposed to that. I mean, when I was in high school, I graduated with a class about like 140, so bigger than yours, but I was still the only gay guy in my class, and there was probably 2 Black people. Like it was very white. And so I think bringing, you know, Hamilton and all these shows, you know, shows why it's important, and it normalizes it, and they see it and they're like, okay, you know, but I even my older brother, who I don't have the closest relationship with because he's very conservative. He's very basically everything that I'm not. So he doesn't understand Black Lives Matter. He doesn't understand me being gay. And I think it's just because, you know, like staying in a small town, you don't get exposed to things, and things tend to stay the same and stay neutral. So I think bringing that to people who will never go to New York and will never even go to Chicago to experience these things, it definitely opens up conversations and opens up your mind and seeing things. And yeah, I think it will be great.
I think what's really changed. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
I was going back to what Jay had said earlier about like theater bringing forward the topics and like educating the mass populace when the government won't. Going back to the normal Hart, Kramer very much put New York's mayor in the 80s on blast. He talks and he drops Ed Koch's name. He says he is a closeted gay man who is doing anything that he can to wipe this crap under the rug. Like he very blatantly name drops. I didn't know anything. My graduating class was fairly larger than Austin's and Jack's. Mine was 210 students. I don't know how many members of the queer community there were. I think there was maybe 1 Black individual that graduated. I didn't know anything about any of this. It wasn't until my like 3rd semester as an undergrad at Penn State. So I'd already gone through 4 years of community college before I read the normal Hart and really got an understanding of this. And that was just sitting in my 400 level English class, reading the script for the first time and going, holy shit, there's a whole crapload of history that I didn't know anything about because I didn't learn it growing up in rural Perry County. So not watching the movies, I was able to get more, but just having it in any way that's available for people to be able to read it and open those conversations, having it brought onto the screen, you know, the way that Hamilton is a huge bonus. because then you're able to see it. And when you're doing things like streaming, you can then, pause it and have a conversation, like that kind of thing. So I don't really know where I was going with that, but yeah.
It is about education, and it is about like artists always pushing that education when government won't. And I think like these are the most important things in the world. Everyone has these, and there are queer kids all over the world that don't have the kind of representation in their own hometowns and in their own families and at their schools, but they can get on an app and they can see this person and that person and this queer representation and that queer representation. And so this idea of putting, I mean, Broadway's not coming back until 2021, possibly spring of 2021. And so if these stories that are so important about pushing the queer narrative are getting put on film, then heck yeah, let's get it out to those kids, because it's important that they know that they are represented and that it does get better. And like I said, it starts from the top down. I mean, white people have to stop telling Black stories. That's what's happened in theater for years and years and years. Go back to every single major musical about the Black experience. Look at the writers of those stories. They are white people, and that's not okay, right? And so like we now as artists have to open the door to allow for those actual stories to come in, so that they can tell their stories, so that we don't continue to whitewash those stories, so that queer people can tell our stories, so that it can't be heteronormized, if that's even a word. I just made up a new word today. But yeah, it's an ongoing story.
I think that's part of why I like being a part of the pharmacy theater, and I know Austin will be able to talk to this. Part of our building this was so that we had not just experimental theater, but so we were able to have a more diverse theater in this small little area of Pennsylvania. So even if we are, maybe getting 50 views on our live streams on YouTube, when we do our read-throughs of the normal Hart, we're doing the zoo, like all of these things, that's 50 people somewhere in the world that's seeing this from the comfort of their home. So we might not be, Lin-Manuel Miranda on Broadway, but we're a group of people that are still making as much of an effort as we can to make sure that this is getting out to other people. And you guys are a part of it.
It all starts somewhere, and like no matter how many people or whatever, like it matters that we're taking the time to do it. If one person sees it, like that is amazing. So yeah.
Exactly. And even when we were producing shows in real spaces, it feels like forever ago we were doing that. But whenever we started this whole theater company, we made a promise to not do those mainstream shows that everyone loves. They're great shows. They have their time. I'm just tired of seeing ragtime every season and every theater company. Like, so I got a subscription to the New Play Exchange, and I started scouring through thousands of plays about queer life, about being Black in America, and just trying to find these stories written by people who are living those experiences to bring to the stage. And it's not a great business model, because people only see shows they know or they've heard about. So we did a show called Boys Go to Jupiter by Nathaniel Foster. Great show about this boy in a conservative town dealing with his sexuality, bringing he meets a boy, he falls in love with the boy, but then it shows the breakdown of understanding your sexuality. Like, he hurts the boy he's in love with. He's like, I'm not straight, I was just experimenting, you're nothing to me. And then it shows the real experience of figuring out who you are, because believe it or not, you always hurt the first person more than you think you do. When you're coming out, you find a boy you're interested in, you find a girl you're interested in, and you do a number on them because they're comfortable, you're not, and it wavers a lot. And we did that piece over 3 days, 3 shows in a roundabout setting, had about 30 people show up. because they didn't understand the piece, they didn't know about the piece, didn't know what it was called, didn't know what it was about, they never heard of it before. But now in the theater community around us, I hear about it all the time. They're like, we should have came out to see this show. It sounded so great. My friend who saw it said it was amazing. But they didn't want to take a chance because it was a topic they weren't comfortable with. It was whatever. But now they know it's good. They're like, we need to go see it. Like, we're not doing it anymore. So why didn't you come see it in the first place? So,
well, you're starting it. You're planting the seed, and fingers crossed that like this theater company grows to be the biggest thing in the world. And so then all of a sudden you're going to hold a position of power to be able to tell those kinds of stories that aren't mass media produced, right? Yeah. I commend you for your work.
Yeah.
So thanks, theater.
Part of what, again, another thing that I love is that we have our workshop live series where we're finding not necessarily just local playwrights, but playwrights that'll reach out to us and say, hey, we saw your live stream of, whatever workshop you did. Can we do something? We get a cast together and we do a reading. And it not only helps the playwright, it helps the acting community because they're able to reach out to us. It helps us as a theater. And when we pick these workshops or these plays to workshop, we're then looking for those non-mainstream ideas. So it's even, I think it's helping everyone overall, because it's helping get playwrights who are willing to write those taboo and those forbidden topics and get their work seen by someone or by a group of people, and it gets it out there, and then it gets it into the homes of these people who are watching, and it makes them start to think and it makes them start to talk.
Oh yeah, I've definitely done more virtual productions than we have real life productions. Because workshops, like, give me a week's notice, I'll find the actors, we can go on Zoom on Saturday, read through it. Like, virtual has, I think, helped us understand the world of theater a little bit more, because it is a tight-knit community. Sara had mentioned earlier about the Scarlet Letter Bible Belt, and that piece had won a contest to be produced, but the producers of that contest said it was too controversial for their stage. It won the award, but they weren't going to produce it because it was too controversial.
That's fine, we'll produce it.
I was like, that's fine, like, we'll read it aloud, like, I don't care. But so we are over our 1 p.m. cutoff, so I just want everyone to just wrap up their thoughts. So just say some final words before we end this lovely discussion we're having. Anyone have anything they want to say?
I'm going to say that, this is really important. It's like what we said, like, it doesn't matter how many people it can get to. Like, there might be 10 people that see it, but it might change the one person's opinion. It might educate one person. So you can't be afraid to actually, like, speak up about it, because you speaking up could change one person, but that's still one person that you're making, like, educating them on everything going on.
Yeah, I agree. No, I just want to say thank you to you guys. I had a really good time. It was nice to do something a little theater related. I mean, things are happening, changes are being made. Of course, it's going to take a long time and a lot of hard work, but I think we're making strides, and it's nice to see and talk about and share ideas and stuff. So I'm very thankful. Yeah.
I would just say we've been pretty privileged as white people to have queer stories being told over the last few decades. And so I think it is our time to really amplify those queer voices of color in a major way, both on stage, behind the scenes, on screen, in writers' rooms, in casting offices. I think that is the next step for us as privileged white people, is to understand the kind of struggle that our brothers and sisters and others of color are coming from, and to kind of use our platforms to help elevate their voices in this time, because I think that's the true work that's happening.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the point in the broadcast where I just say what's coming up next. So all of you at home, if you want to tune in next Saturday night at 7:30 p.m., we are going to be doing a virtual reading of The Normal Heart. So if you want to see or hear what we've all been talking about next Saturday. And then next Sunday is another Real Talk, and that one is about portraying disability on stage. So if you're interested in learning anything about that, come by. We have a lot of disability activists and actors with disabilities who are going to come talk about their experiences. So that's up next weekend. So thank you guys all for tuning in.